One more gland which is important in reproduction are the milk producing glands or mammary glands. These mammary glands are known as breasts, which are seen in the form of bulges in the chest region. These breasts are smaller before puberty and their size increases after puberty and during pregnancy under the influence of hormones. The anterior part of the breasts is in the form of a bulge which is called nipple. And around the nipple there is an area which is light pink in color. This area is known as areola. And inside this gland are lactiferous glands. Lactiferous glands are compound tubulosaccular glands. This is just one gland here. Between the glands there is connective tissue and fat. So the major size of the breast is dependent on the fat which is stored in between these lactiferous glands. So these are lactiferous glands. Each lactiferous gland has a duct through which the milk that is produced in the gland will be released, and just near the areola these ducts, they open into ampulla. There are small swellings and these ampullae, they again open with the help of ducts into this areola region. The function of these ampullae is temporary storage of milk. So this swollen part is known as ampulla and these ducts are lactiferous ducts. And in between this is connective tissue and fat. So here is fat and connective tissue. Milk production is under the control of various hormones like prolactin and all, but that takes place after parturition. Size of the breast increases due to estrogen and progesterone which are produced during puberty time. So that is the time when enlargement of breast takes place, and again during pregnancy also. So the structural thing, we have to just see the structure of ovary, what is inside. So ovaries, they release the eggs collected by fallopian tubes and coming into the uterus. The egg or the zygote would come into the uterus. Uterus has three parts, the fundus, body and cervix. Cervix opens into vagina, which is a narrow muscular tube, acts as a birth canal as well as a place where the sperms can be deposited. External genitalia, a depression, spindle-like depression called vestibule, two openings, upper opening is of urinary system, lower opening is of the genital or reproductive system. On either side of the vestibule, there is a fold which is known as labia minora. At the tip, there is a loose skin where these two folds they join. There is a loose skin called prepuce which covers or protects a small triangular erectile tissue called clitoris, which is homologous to penis of males. On either side of labia minora is one more fold which is called labia majora, which is homologous to scrotum. Now, when we made these mesenteries, we said that these mesenteries, which was mesovarium, these are membranous structures which are holding or which are connecting these ovaries to the body wall, and we said we will talk of one more. So these ovaries are also connected to the uterus with the help of another mesentery which is known as ovarian ligament. ovarian ligament. So ovaries, they remain in their position because of the mesenteries, one which connects it to or attaches it to the body wall, lateral body wall, and one which connects it to the uterus. How are the fallopian tubes attached or they remain in their position? So fallopian tubes also attached to the body wall with a mesentery which is known as mesosalpinx. So these are membranous structures which hold the organs in their normal position. Now let us see the internal structure of the ovary. So now let us see the internal structure of the ovary. The ovary has a fibrous layer and it is divided, the inner material or inner matrix is divided into two zones. The outer zone is called cortex and the inner is simply called matrix or medulla region. Under this outer fibrous layer, there is germinal epithelium and there is a poorly developed tunica albuginea. So here between the cortex region and this epithelium there is tunica albuginea. Same name as we saw in case of the testis, but in testis tunica albuginea is very well developed, here it is poorly developed. Now in this ovary part, when we take a section, we see the follicles or the egg in its various stages of development. So at some places we find just the cluster of follicles. So this is just a cluster. Then these follicles, they produce estrogen. Follicles produce estrogen. What stimulates this follicle FSH, that we will take up in hormonal control. But under the influence of this estrogen, now one follicular cell starts to enlarge. There is a cluster of normally 500 follicles together. One will enlarge and others remain around it. So there is a cluster and one cell enlarges under the influence of estrogen. This is the cell which will give rise to the egg. Final stage, this is going to continue. When this grows, we get to a stage which is known as Graafian follicle. Named after the scientist. So Graafian follicle. If we see a Graafian follicle and we are skipping some intermediate stages here, what we find is a large structure. All around there are follicular cells. That means these cells, they went on or they keep on dividing and we get these cells. So there is a thick layer of cells, multiple layers, all are follicular cells, and this thick membrane is known as membrana granulosa. So this complete layer is called membrana granulosa. But the inner cells, they form a layer which is known as tunica interna, outer make tunica externa, just on the basis of their position. If they are inner, tunica interna, and if they are outer cells, then tunica externa. And these two together makes that complete layer of membrana granulosa. From one region, we find that there is a cord of cells with which the egg is suspended. So there is a cluster again, but it acts like a cord with which the egg will be suspended in this cavity. This cord is known as germ hill or cumulus oophorus, with which the egg is suspended. Now the egg is suspended here in this cavity. This is the egg, but actually it is not the egg, it is in its secondary oocyte stage. So we can write it as egg, but we have to remember it is secondary oocyte. This is the stage when the egg is released. So when we make the ovary and we say egg is released, it is not actually a fully formed egg, it is a stage before that. So this is egg with its nucleus and some layers of follicular cells around it. These are also follicular cells, but I am using a different color to show these follicles because these follicles will be released along with the egg. So when egg detaches, it will detach in such a manner that some follicular cells around it, they would also be released. So this egg is suspended in the cavity. The cavity is known as antrum, and it is filled with a liquid which is known as liquor folliculi. It is a fluid which is secreted by the follicles itself, and that is why it is known as liquor folliculi. So this antrum is filled with a liquid called liquor folliculi. So this complete structure is known as Graafian follicle. And how is this Graafian follicle formed? It is formed from a cluster of follicles. Only one cell changes into the egg, all other cells divide and form this entire structure. Now we will show one more stage which is seen after this. When we say that the egg is released, how would the egg be released? When egg is released, this membrane which is around it, it breaks. So when this membrane breaks, the egg detaches from here and is released. So release of egg is known as ovulation. Release of egg, again though we are writing egg, but we have to keep this thing in mind that it is a secondary oocyte. Release of egg is known as ovulation. Ovulation is under the control of a hormone called LH, luteinizing hormone. So now the egg is released. Remaining part of the Graafian follicle, that means this outer membrane, the cumulus oophorus, this part changes into a temporary endocrine gland. So if we see a stage beyond this, suppose this is the part of the ovary, the follicles are changing into Graafian follicle and the egg is released. Now what do we see? We see these cells here, that is the remaining part of the Graafian follicle, This changes into a temporary endocrine gland called corpus luteum. Corpus luteum secretes progesterone. So, this Graafian follicle after ovulation changes into a temporary endocrine gland called corpus luteum. But corpus luteum is not immediately formed. There are 3 stages of these changes. So, follicles, one cell grows, then we see Graafian follicle. Then after this damage, there is hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is wherever there is blood loss, blood clotting takes place. So, after Graafian follicle, the stage is called corpus hemorrhagicum. Because there is injury which has taken place due to the rupturing. Then this corpus hemorrhagicum changes into corpus luteum. Which is also known as a yellow gland, which secretes progesterone. Once this corpus luteum, its function is over, then it will undergo degeneration. This will happen during menstrual cycle. In menstrual cycle, the egg which is released does not get fertilized. So, if the egg is not fertilized, it will be lost from the body, and then there is no role of this corpus luteum. Progesterone which is secreted by it is a pregnancy hormone. So, if fertilization takes place, then only progesterone requirement or progesterone secretion should be maintained. But if no fertilization, corpus luteum will be lost. It changes into corpus albicans. So, these are the changes which take place. So, first Graafian follicle, then ovulation takes place, then remaining part of the Graafian follicle, because there is an injury which has taken place, forms corpus hemorrhagicum. It changes into the endocrine gland corpus luteum, and then it degenerates, which is corpus albicans. So, this is what we see in the ovary. So, various stages of development of egg are visible whenever we see the section of ovary. Now, let us talk about the hormonal control in case of females. Hormonal control in females. First, these follicles, they are stimulated by FSH. So, FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone, stimulates the follicles. Second hormone, when follicles get stimulated, they produce estrogen. So, follicles, we can write stimulated, secrete estrogen. As estrogen level increases, it stimulates the pituitary to secrete one more hormone, that is LH, luteinizing hormone. All these hormones you must have studied in class 11th in endocrine system. So, this luteinizing hormone, it is required for ovulation. So, higher level of estrogen would stimulate pituitary to secrete luteinizing hormone. This luteinizing hormone causes ovulation, that is release of egg. When egg is released, the temporary endocrine gland is formed. So, corpus luteum, which is a temporary endocrine gland, it produces progesterone. So, there are two sex hormones, this one estrogen and progesterone, and these two are responsible for the changes that take place during puberty. And we have not talked about the hormones which help in milk production, that we will talk of when we come to the stage of lactation. So, follicle stimulating hormone from pituitary stimulate the follicles. When follicles get stimulated, estrogen is produced by the follicles. Higher level of estrogen stimulate pituitary to release LH. LH causes ovulation. After the egg is released, the corpus luteum starts producing progesterone. And these two hormones, that is estrogen and progesterone, are responsible for the changes which take place during menstrual cycle as well as puberty. So, these are the hormones which are regulating the female reproductive system and excluding the hormones which are required for parturition and lactation, that is lactogenic hormone, oxytocin, we have not talked about that. So, that we will take up when we actually discuss those processes. Now, puberty in females. In females, the puberty age or age of puberty is little early. It is around 13 years, but in some cases the puberty period starts little early, then it is known as precocious puberty. It may start at the age of 11, 12, little early. So, but normally around 13 years. What all changes take place during puberty? Estrogen concentration increases. So, these hormones, that is estrogen and progesterone, they start bringing about changes in the female body. Those changes are enlargement of breasts, enlargement of breasts, widening of the pelvic region. Pelvic region is the hip region. Hip region is the region where the uterus is present. So, when the female gets pregnant, the uterus has to expand and there should be enough space for expansion of that uterus, and that is why the pelvic region or the hip region, it widens, and this widening of hip region gives the female that typical hourglass like body, wide shoulders, narrower waist, and again wider pelvic region. So, widening of pelvic region. Appearance of hair on the body. In case of females, the body hair are restricted only to 3 regions, that is armpits or underarms, groin and little bit on the body, but those are light. So, only 2 regions where they are restricted, whereas in case of males there are facial hair also. So, armpits and groin. In case of males it is armpit, chest region and groin along with the facial hair. So, hair on the body only 2 regions, armpits and groin. Menstrual cycle starts. Menstrual cycle starts. When menstrual cycle starts, it is an indication that egg formation has also started. So, that means oogenesis also starts. Egg production, that means during this time or after this puberty period is over, the female is capable of reproduction. The hormones are proper, whichever are required for maintaining pregnancy. Breasts have enlarged so that the newborn can be fed with milk. Pelvic region has widened so that when the uterus expands or stretches, there is enough space. Menstrual cycle, during pregnancy menstrual cycle does not take place, but all other times it takes place. It is a cyclic change which takes place in the female reproductive system. And oogenesis, that is egg formation. In human females, one egg is produced per month or approximately per 28 days. So, this cycle, menstrual cycle, is a 28-day cycle theoretically, but it is again variable. So, in a month one egg is produced, and normally the ovaries produce eggs alternatively. So, a right ovary in 1 month, the next month left ovary, and this goes on. So, these are the changes which take place during puberty. The time is around 13 years. Now, with this part we have understood the system, the male reproductive and the female reproductive system, and now we will start with the actual process of reproduction. When we started this chapter, we divided the complete process into various steps. The first step was gametogenesis, and after understanding the system, now we will understand this process of gamete formation. So, the next thing is our first step, that is gamete formation. So, we have understood the male and female reproductive system, and quickly let us talk about those homologous structures that we were discussing. There are 3 structures which are homologous. Let me write it here. In case of males and females, there are structures which are homologous. In case of males, penis, which is the external genitalia, it is homologous to clitoris of females. In case of males, it is a functional organ which is required for copulation. In case of females, it is a non-functional structure. And why are they considered homologous? Because they have same erectile tissue, that is corpora cavernosa. This is very, very important. The next structure which is homologous is a gland. In case of males, it is bulbo-urethral gland, which is also known as Cowper's gland. Cowper's gland. It is homologous to bulbo-vestibular gland of the females. So, same function, same origin, same tissue. The third structure which is homologous is scrotum or scrotal sacs in case of males, homologous to labia majora. So, these 3 homologous structures we have to remember, they are very, very important. So, after this we will start with the gametogenesis, which is the first step.